Welcome back to another episode of Economy.lk front row video series. We have another interesting personality here with us today to talk about trade and investment and give a more of an international perspective. To be more precise, to give a more of a New Zealand point of view and what Sri Lanka could maybe take forward as well. So we welcome on front row Ralph Hayes, who is the Consul General and Trade Commissioner for New Zealand Trade and Enterprise.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Delighted to be here.
So I think generally when we talk about trade with New Zealand, we generally associate it with the dairy industry and a lot of the products and investments and services that come with it. Beyond this sector, I think the Commission is doing a lot of work to foster more investments. What are some of the opportunities you all are seeing? What are some of the discussions broadly in terms of sectors that you see as potential for both New Zealand and maybe even other foreign investment?
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation today for this discussion. We're delighted to be here. New Zealand is expanding our footprint in the market. We're looking to open a High Commission here next year. But as you've rightly said, historically I think New Zealand has mainly been seen as a dairy producer. However, that's changing. We realise that we need to diversify our offering and our portfolio. Don't put all our eggs in one basket. So we've had trade missions here. We had a trade mission here in April. We had around 13, 14 companies with around 23 delegates. And we didn't have any commodity companies in that portfolio. We had some aviation companies, infrastructure, technology, service companies, and health sector companies. And as I said, our approach is to diversify a portfolio, minimises the risk to New Zealand by putting everything in one place, and we have more to offer in that space. And so we had some really good exchanges, and we're back since that trade mission. The team and I are here back with the Ceylon Chamber and the Business and Investment Conclave 2018 to participate, to follow up on some of those leads or relationships that were built in April, to help to foster those, move those forward, and understand more about the ecosystem and the environment here in Sri Lanka. So you're right, we're not just dairy. We do have Fonterra have operations here, but my role is to help all New Zealand companies into the market, and we help those either establish an entity or grow or expand. And in my mind, it's those companies that are scalable, that are offering a broad portfolio of services that are going to succeed or take New Zealand, help us to grow New Zealand bigger, better, faster.
Within some of these industries you mentioned, what are some of the things that are attracting New Zealand businesses to think of Sri Lanka as a potential market? And maybe is it a case of our position with relative to what's around us, or is it merely to expand probably some of the export?
I think it's a combination of things actually. I think location is important, and I think being both island nations, we realise the importance that we don't have a large internal population to sustain us, and if we're going to grow our economies we need to be outward looking. Island nations, so historically we're into trade and export, and I see a lot of similarities with Sri Lanka, both island nations, not a large population, internal population, a need for us to be international traders. And I see some of the good signs around the FTA between Singapore and Sri Lanka. I know the India-Sri Lankan FTA is being revised and refreshed. That's a good sign as well. So a lot of the companies I see Sri Lanka as a gateway to the region, and also a place where we can tap into the resource of the Sri Lankan resource to expand our offering globally. And I think as the global supply chains become to grow and become more enhanced and more sophisticated, I think Sri Lanka is strategically placed. The education levels in Sri Lanka are good, which is really good, especially around that knowledge and building expertise and tapping into that capability for our New Zealand companies to expand globally into Sri Lanka, but also tap into your strategic locations. So
you, I think, briefly mentioned about free trade agreements, and I know Sri Lanka just inked one with Singapore earlier this year. And if you look at New Zealand's experience as well, it has done a lot of free trade agreements, sometimes even with larger economies. And it has navigated and expanded and pretty much, I think, diversified as well some of its existing exports. What, in that process of doing these FTAs and maybe doing those domestic reforms needed, what lessons could an island nation like Sri Lanka learn from and pursue as it goes beyond Singapore to the others, as you mentioned, such as India, China, Thailand? What can Sri Lanka take out of?
Look, I think it's about minimising risk. I mean, New Zealand in the 80s, we had more or less an FTA and we sold everything to the UK. And then when the UK joined the common market in the early 80s, we suddenly had to find new partners. And so I think it's about minimising risk, and I think Sri Lanka recognises that need and that to be a global player and being well positioned. And for us, I know the RCEP agreement's important for New Zealand. I think that's of real interest to us. You've got a broad coalition of countries that we can work with as a group to find a commonality, and then the trade can benefit all. So I think, again, I think for economies like Sri Lanka and New Zealand, being small, agile, sophisticated, with a good educated population, with things like software and the disruption that some technology and automation and things like that are making, I think with a well-educated population we can participate and enjoy. I know we've had a FTA with China for more than 12 years or so. That's been good for us. As I said, it gave us other markets. We had to find alternatives. I'm sure Sri Lanka would be keen to diversify and have other markets as things come and go, and geopolitics plays a part in the dynamics of economies and governments come and go, that having options or flexibility to adjust and pivot depending on the demand or requirements of people and the things they need out of Sri Lanka.
So I think there you heard it, I think within this short span of time, Ralph talking about the fact that New Zealand is not only just going to have a dairy presence in Sri Lanka, there's much more that comes with it. And I think in the next few years, and the commitment to set up a high commission here, I think is a testament to that fact as well. We also talked about some of the sectors that are of interest and some of the reasons and the commonalities that we see between the two countries, and also on the FTA angle, what New Zealand has benefited from it and what maybe Sri Lanka could do in terms of positioning itself and expose itself to the region more. So thank you, Ralph, for being on the show, and stay tuned to our viewers on Economy.lk for more videos like this, where we talk to eminent personalities discussing different economic point of views. Thank you.